Over the past 60 years or so, developed countries have poured about $1 trillion in aid into Africa, yet poverty and hunger are still rampant. In a recent book, Dead Aid, Dambisa Moyo suggests it's time to shut off the spigot or at least set a deadline. I asked the Harvard-educated economist to explain what that would accomplish.
My approach in this book is really to focus on the economic problems of aid. And my fundamental premise is that we will not get solid institutions or political institutions that we would like to see across the African continent until we see strong economic growth and the emergence of a solid middle class. So to my critics, I actually say that we essentially, in an aid-dependent world, we're less likely to get the types of improvements in economics and the reduction in poverty that will actually be the prerequisites to see the ushering in of solid political systems and democratic institutions.
What do you see as the alternative?
The alternative, just looking across the emerging world, places like South Africa and Botswana very clearly show that the alternatives are based on free market solutions, obviously in an albeit more regulated way. There is no evidence that aid creates jobs for Africans, and ultimately when you have a population, as Africa does, of over 60% of the population under the age of 24, this is what we should be focusing on job creation.
So let's be clear, what is it that you want to see? You want to see the aid basically, stop?
The fundamental thing that we should all be aspiring to, and I think we do fundamentally, is a time when Africa does not need to be dependent on aid. And I really am aspiring for a time when we can have a serious discussion about exit strategies. Now, in the book, I prescribe 5 years. That may be too aggressive for some places, but ultimately the important message to take away from the book is that we need to have that discussion.
What is your thought on China and China's increasing investment on the continent in different African countries and how that comes without any conditionality?
Well, I think that what the Chinese have been able to do across Africa is commendable. The approach to Africa is very much focused on business and less so on charity and the notion that we should be doling out handouts. Now, that's not to say that it's perfect, and we obviously need to focus on policy making and ensuring that African policymakers are acting in the best interests of Africans and holding to task the Chinese so that Africans do benefit from the wave of foreign direct investment that we've seen, particularly coming from the Chinese. I think the key conditionality is basically having a clear and credible agenda that at some point in the foreseeable future, aid will cease to exist. I think that's a conditionality enough. I think that we could even have the debate that perhaps aid should increase over an interim period. But I think that African governments need to, and not just African governments, but African society as a whole and the global community needs to approach the African problem through the lens of a timeline which is finite, which actually, upon which Africa will be off of the aid drug.